I'm Diana Fellsound for Fox Lifestyle. Forget Budweiser. These days, it's all about bourbon. The American whiskey is seeing a surge in popularity both here at home and overseas. Joining me today to talk about all things bourbon is Trey Zoeller, master blender at Jefferson's Bourbon. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thanks for having me over here.
Yeah, well, it's very tempting to want to break into these bad boys right now.
They're open.
Well, just this week, there's a new report that says that bourbon and Tennessee whiskey sales are up 9.6%, and that's to $2.7 billion. So why the bourbon boom?
You know, it's kind of like the perfect storm. There are a number of factors that came together. One was the dip in the economy in 2008. There's a lot of value in bourbon.
Yeah.
So people stopped drinking out. Bars, restaurants started drinking at home, so they started looking for value at that time. And bourbons, which have a lot of age, it's actually more expensive to put bourbon into a bottle than any other spirit.
Wow.
So they saw that value and they wanted to experience it. Mad Men certainly helped. The Draper effect, people will call it.
Oh.
And then the convergence of classic cocktails. And people started, the mixologists looked back at what classic cocktails were actually made of. And most of it was made from American whiskey. Rise in bourbons.
Right, so because of the classic cocktail, that's why we're seeing the increase in bourbon drinking.
And that's one of the factors, yes.
And when
absolutely.
you think about bourbon, it's a sipping kind of liqueur, right?
It should be.
It should be. Well, we
Not
all have
all
a friend who
times,
doesn't
right.
know how to sip, right?
Absolutely.
But it's something, it's kind of like a gentleman's classic drink. My brother's a big fan, and a lot of millennials actually are
absolutely
choosing bourbon over beer. Why do you think
over
that
beers,
is?
over clear spirits? Because there's a lot to learn about it. That's the other convergence. The internet, your smartphone, you can learn about all these bourbons so quickly, and there's so much to know. There's so much history to it. Specifically here, in the U.S., it is Americana. It is what America's all about. And each of my bourbons here that I have in front are very different from the other ones, and they're very different from the vast array of bourbons that are out there. So it's not just like a vodka, which is 5 times distilled or 6 times distilled. There's a lot of different processes that go into each and every bourbon.
What's a fun fact that people don't know about bourbon? Because you said it's rich in its history.
It is rich in its history. There were 2,500 distilleries in Kentucky alone prior to Prohibition. That's my dad who wrote a book on bourbon in Kentucky. He identified 2,500. There were 8 until 10 years ago. Wow. So it really... When I got into the business in 1997, bourbon had been in a 30-year decline. Now it is in an absolute boom. Micro distilleries are popping up all over the place.
They're very, very popular.
Very popular. And there are going to be some great bourbons that are produced out of those, but they need time in the wood.
Yeah.
The wood really gives the heart and soul to what bourbon is.
So how should someone have bourbon? Is it neat? Is it in a classic cocktail? What do you recommend?
Well, I drink it neat or on the rocks. However, I'd say drink it however you like it. If you like it with Coke, you're not going to like it neat necessarily. It's kind of a stepping up process. So try something you're comfortable with. Don't necessarily go to the 32-foot diving board and do a couple gainers off it right away. Ease into it.
Okay.
But trying it neat initially will give you a big burst of flavor. And then you can start adding ice or water and kind of taking it down from that point.
Is there anything that you should never mix bourbon with? Is it just like people with fruit punch, you're like, oh my gosh, step aside?
As I said, whatever you're comfortable with. I don't drink it that way, but if you like it that way, who am I to tell you how to like it?
Finally, what's the next trend in bourbon that we can look out for?
Well, we've got a lot of experiments going on right now. Finishings are big. We're just about to launch a product where I aged bourbon for 6 years in Kentucky. Then I brought Groth Cabernet barrels from Napa. I sweated the barrels to bring the wine out.
Wow.
And then added bourbon to it, and we've been aging that bourbon for 8 months in these Cabernet barrels.
So would that make the bourbon have a little bit of a sweeter, oakier kind of
There's actually more
reminiscent?
Fruit flavors that are going to come out of it.
That's so clever.
So it's,
wow.
I like Cabernet, so that's why I wanted to work with Cabernets, and I love Groth Cabernet. So specifically, that's why I went with it.
That's a really interesting spin.
One of the products that we have right here are Jefferson's Ocean, which to me, a lot of people have said is very cutting edge. What we did is we took 6-year-old bourbon that's aged in Kentucky, we put it on ships, sent it around the world basically, sent it to 30 ports, crossed the equator 4 times, touched 5 continents, and in that time it's constantly rocking back and forth. So the bourbon, which was initially when it's distilled as clear as water, It's picking up color, flavor. The barrel acts as a filter and takes the stringency out of the alcohol. And then, so that's constantly happening. So it's aging at a much more accelerated rate.
Out of all of these bottles that you brought today, which one of these is your personal favorite?
I like our Jefferson's Reserve, which is really, I think, the quintessential bourbon. What I've done with that is I've taken bourbons that are aged up to 18 years, 4 different recipes, and then I blend them together. And I'm doing that to try to get balance and complexity. So there's lots of flavors up front, there's a lot of weight mid-palate, and then there's a great easy finish that comes up and sits warm on your chest.
And it's a beautiful amber color too. Well, thank you for letting us know all about bourbon and joining us today.
You got it. Thank you.
Of course. And thank you for watching. For FoxNews.com, I'm Diana Falzone.